I like my dystopian mystery box shows the way I like my women. Confusing. So, off the top, let me just review the first two episodes of Silo real quick, and then I'll get into what actually want to talk about. No spoilers for this first part. Silo is a fascinating, really well done, well acted, well written, well conceived TV series so far. And it's based on a novel series, so that makes sense. The thing about, when you base a TV show around novels, especially this kind of TV show where you have world building, like you've created a whole new world with a whole new system of rules, so much has to be thought out. Most TV shows, they'll have about 8 weeks to conceive everything, in the writer's room after they've written the pilot. Now, maybe a lot of thought, sometimes people work on a pilot script for years. They'll pitch it, they'll finally get it made. There's so many different permutations and variations of this. So, let's not get lost in the weeds here. But typically, you'll have about 8 weeks to break the entire season of what you're going to do, the world building. And what will happen is world building decisions are made on plot choices. Okay, so we want this guy to go out. We want him to be lost in the desert for this one particular episode. But what's the tension there? Well, you're not allowed to be out after dark. If you're out after dark, you get punished. Okay, so we need to create a reason. Why would you be punished for after dark? So they create the world building reason for why, right? That you see, it's the cart before the horse. They have a plot they want to tell, so then they have to create tension by creating a rule, and then later for the rest of the series they have to justify that rule. Like maybe it doesn't make sense you're not allowed after dark because the only time you can gather food is after dark. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm just pulling this out of my ass, but I'm just saying. So that's how you see some of these shows go off the rails. Because they'll in the first season they'll make world building decisions based on plots they want to have. And then they have to live up to that in later seasons. Buffy's a perfect example of this. Vampires can't breathe. Well, then you can't hold a vampire's head underwater and torture him in season 3 if you establish in season 1 that vampires don't breathe, right? It makes no sense. That's how you get into trouble. Because the world building is not well thought out. They create world building rules because they want to make a specific plot happen. It's different when you adapt a novel because the author has spent years thinking about the world building. Yes, he wrote his plot, but he also thought about, okay, this is the plot I want to have, and this is world building, but he's already told the whole story. Because here's what happens. If you get to the last chapter and this world building rule doesn't make any sense and it's keeping you from doing what you actually need to do later on or something's going to contradict itself, you go back to chapter 2 and you change the rule. You can do that in a novel. You can't do that in season 2 of a TV series when season 1's already out on DVD and streaming, right? So, when you adapt a novel, especially if you do it faithfully, the world building is going to make a lot more sense. It's going to be a lot more dense, it's going to be a lot more thought out, and it's more cohesive. So I prefer mythology, lore heavy, world building heavy stories to be based on novels for that reason. Because it's going to hold together. Very rarely do we have cases where TV shows that are, dystopian specifically or some kind of genre show where there's a lot of heavy mythology, witchcraft and, monsters and stuff like that. Very rarely do they hold together if they're not based on a novel. So this is based on a novel. The world building is going to make sense. And you can see that in the first 2 episodes. And I've only seen the first 2 episodes. I don't know. I think maybe it comes out every Friday or something. I guess May 5th yesterday, is when the first 2 episodes premiered. And I assume that's just a 2-episode premiere. And from now on, it's going to be 1 episode a week. The first 2 episodes hold together very well. Strongly acted. The interesting thing about this is, by the way, the first episode has a protagonist, the sheriff. And the second episode has a different protagonist, the engineer. I wonder if they're going to do that. I don't know how many episodes there are this season, but it would be kind of interesting. I don't think they're going to do that. I think the first episode was kind of like a prelude, kind of like a cold open almost, if you consider the entire season like one story, one novel maybe, maybe they're adapting the first novel in the first season. Then this would be the prelude chapter, the first episode. But we'll have to wait to see the 3rd episode to see if they have a different protagonist for the 3rd episode. That would be interesting. I've never seen a show actually do that. Each episode centered on something somebody else. Lost did it, but they established everybody first and then they started doing that, right? But yeah, just a quick thumbnail review, Great series. If you like this genre at all, if you like dystopian stories, you need to jump on this immediately. Because this is a really good story. It's well told, well acted, and like I said, the world building is well thought out. All right, going to be spoilers beyond this because I'm going to get into what I actually want to talk about. So if you haven't seen it yet, go do that and come back. Okay, so what I want to talk about is how hard it is becoming to surprise the audience in this day and age. 50 years ago, The Butler Did It was oh my God, what a shock. The Butler did it. I never saw that coming. Now it's impossible for The Butler to do it because it's such a damn cliche. What used to be shocking has now become so ordinary and so common and so pedestrian that you cannot do that as a part of your story. You cannot do it. People are going to see it coming from a mile away. It's boring. Even if they don't see it's coming, it's boring if you reveal it, right? So what happens, first The Butler did it and nobody saw it coming. And then everybody suspects the Butler, and the twist is the Butler didn't do it. So then, what you got to do is then you got to make the Butler knows who did it, but didn't do it. Then you want to make a little hint that you think maybe the Butler did it, but the audience knows the Butler didn't do it, and the show knows the Butler didn't do it. So, and then you reach a point where it's so obvious the Butler didn't do it that the Butler can do it again. You see, it's a cyclical thing. You actually can't have the Butler do it again. If you hint it early, everybody laughs it off, and then it turns out, and then it's almost a joke reveal. I've seen that happen a couple times. Hey, it was actually the Butler did it. The Butler actually did it. There was a twist on it, though. I can't remember what it was, but it was something like it was an accident or something. It's like, wow, this is the first case where the Butler actually did it. But you see how cyclical it is. Like it's harder and harder to fool audiences because we've been having TV drama stories since the 1950s. We've been having movies, good movies, since the 30s. So we're coming up on 100 years of movies and 75 years of TV shows. That's a lot of stories. And we're not even talking about novels, right? That is a lot of entertainment. And every time something new comes out, it pushes creativity a little bit. It constrains creativity a little bit more and more. Because everything's been done. There's nothing new under the sun. Everything has been done. We've seen it all. Once you get to be 35, 40 years old, you've seen tens of thousands of hours of entertainment. You've seen everything. You're very sophisticated. Audiences were not sophisticated in 1950s, 60s, and 70s. There just hadn't been enough stuff to come out yet. Now there has been. It is almost impossible to surprise an audience these days. A baby jumps up out of the crib and shoots somebody in the face. We've seen it before. Probably. If not, that'll be happening next week. Like, there's nothing you can do that can shock the audience anymore. So what do you do? Like, that kind of like if you use my Butler did it analogy. You have to move away from the obvious. Pretend you're doing the obvious thing, but then do the opposite of the obvious thing. But then we've seen that 10 times. So now we know you're just doing the opposite of the obvious thing. So then you got to do a third thing that makes it look like you're doing the opposite of the obvious thing, but you're not doing the obvious thing or the opposite. You're doing the third thing. Well, then we're going to see that coming. So now you can finally come back and do the original thing again. And then that's like it has to be a cycle. You almost have to cycle through the things. Well, what does this have to do with Silo? Well, Silo is fascinating in that, like, I have to say, I don't think I've ever seen a dystopian story where it was a kinder, gentler, fascist government. Where, like, the people in charge are not assholes. It's the system that is the asshole, not the individual people. I don't think I've seen that before. Now, maybe it's happened, especially I haven't seen every dystopian story out there. I haven't read very many dystopian novels at all, right? So maybe the people have done this. But this would be like Hunger Games, but that president, whatever he was, he was a great actor. Sutherland, Donald Sutherland. Like, if he actually was an asshole, it's just like he just was raised this way, and these are the rules, and society will crumble if we don't follow the rules, right? It'd be like that, like this. Because here's the thing: the mayor is not an asshole. She's actually a very empathetic, nice person. She just has fears, and she doesn't want society to crumble. She wants to protect the city and protect everybody, but she's not an asshole. That's a surprise. How many dystopian stories have you seen where the person in charge is not an asshole? I can't think of any. But the system, and see, that's such a great commentary in the world today. because the systemic issues are the real villain here, not individual people. There are awful people, but like typically though, the problems in our world today are caused by systemic issues, not one person. I'm going to cowboy this out and just be a dick to everybody, right? Like, so this is a great commentary on that. But that's not the only surprise in the show. Early on, and this reminds me of there's a Stargate episode that's very similar to this, and I wonder if the novelist was inspired by that Stargate episode because that came out about 15, 20 years ago, where it was a city and they were living underground because it was basically an ice world, and so everybody's living underground, but like they were being controlled and all this stuff. It's very similar setup to this, or if the person who wrote that episode was inspired by the novel, if the novel's really old. The novel's called Wool, I think was the first novel, which makes sense. You use the wool to clean off the sensor, right? And we've seen enough times where, okay, the government's lying to the people, so what they're lying about, the world is actually a great place to be. We can walk outside and be fine right now. They just want to keep us under control, keep us under wraps, because if the whole world is fine and we can just go outside and be free, then you can't control anybody. So obviously they're lying and the world is fine, right? That's the obvious answer. But early on in the second episode, it becomes obvious to me, at least, it's not, they didn't make it overt. I mean, there's enough information there we can draw this conclusion. But there may be people who miss this. I don't know. I doubt it. The world actually is messed up. The world is a radioactive hell where you will die very fast, even though you're wearing the suit, by the way, which is interesting. Even though you're wearing the suit, you still die within 5 minutes. That's crazy, right? But we were supposed to think that the world is fine and they're being lied to, but the world actually, what the lie was that the world was fine. That was a lie. Because you could tell, like, when he was looking out and he was seeing, the green grass and air and seeing the birds and stuff like that, it looked a little off. Now, was that just crappy TV show budget CGI? Or was it crappy dystopian world, this is the best CGI we can do to fool these people? Is that what it was? Clearly it's the second one. That's what it was. That's why he took his helmet off, right? He took his helmet off to prove to himself, wait a minute, this is all a lie. There's no wives' tale going around, because people wonder why, when you give somebody the death penalty, they always meekly walk over under their own power and sit down in the execution chair to die. Why does that happen? Now, I haven't seen any executions, but you never hear about somebody being dragged as 4 officers dragging them one hand. One officer has a leg, another officer has a leg, and 2 other officers have their arms. They have to physically drag them into the chamber and hold them down while somebody ties them to the chair, right? You never see that happen. They just meekly walk in there. Why is that? Well, the old wives' tale is they're drugged. Their last meal, this great last meal, has sedatives in it. And they're so drugged up that they will meekly walk, because you don't want to create a scene. You don't want it to be uncomfortable. You don't want to be embarrassed in front of company, because people come in and witness this stuff, right? So you need these people to be calm and meek. We don't want to make anybody sad, right? So that's the theory, and I believe that's true. Like I don't think like all these people haven't like accepted their demise like that, right? Somebody would be an asshole. So clearly they're drugging these people to make them docile, to come in and go ahead and take this L, right? That's what this reminded me of. Like, you put this CGI on their view screen, so when they walk outside, they will actually clean the sensor, because they'll feel like, hey, I want everybody to see, and then they'll go walk to their death, and no scene is created. It's kind of the same concept, right? You're trying to establish a certain vibe when these people go outside to die, right? So that's why you put the CGI in their view screen. So that's the lie. The lie is actually okay out there. So they can't do the lie being, we're telling you the world sucks, but if you walk outside, it's actually paradise. Because we've seen that lie a million times in dystopian stories. You can't do that anymore. It's boring. It's obvious. People stop watching. Oh, we know what the twist is. That's why they showed 2 episodes, by the way, because the first episode is not clear. The second episode makes it clear that there's a deeper lie beyond the lie we thought there was. You can't have the butler do it anymore, and you can't even have the butler not do it anymore. You have to do a third thing. So that raises the question. what the hell is going on. And that's why this show is so good, because we don't know. I have no idea. I'm pretty good at predicting stuff. I've been a writer all my life, and I've written like independent movies for 15 years, right? So I'm pretty good at deconstructing stories, breaking it down, seeing the skeleton architecture of what, here's what they're setting up, and here's the steps you would build if you're setting this up. So it's pretty easy to see what's coming most times. I have no idea what the hell is going on here. And I just wonder if it's something like they just wanted to make a person's last 5 minutes of life a little bit comfortable, give them a little bit of hope, so they can die on a happy note, and that's all it is. But then some of that got out, circulated to people. People saw a little bit of this footage, the CGI or whatever, and they started believing the lie. Like it just started out as just a simple thing. We want this person's last 5 minutes to be okay, and that turned into people. You know, it's kind of you half hear a conversation, you don't hear it correctly, and you get the wrong idea. People found a little bit of this footage, got the wrong idea, and started telling, "Hey, that's paradise out there. They're lying to us." It could be that simple. Because otherwise, why would you want people to think it's paradise if it's not, right? So I think it's just they were trying to do a specific thing and it got a little bit out of control. And plus, like it's been 140 years, so it's like a game of telephone being played over what 6 generations. Things get lost in translation at that point. So yeah, they're not doing the obvious stuff, and that already makes this a S tier show. Because I love dystopian stories, but they've become boring because it's the same thing every damn time. So now, what would really be fascinating is if this story is about we're trying to protect you people, and you idiots are going to destroy the entire city over a misunderstanding. That would be fascinating. Because they're establishing judicial. We've seen Common had like one line of dialogue, right? Like, in the first 2 episodes. And I think he's headed judicial. They're establishing judicial as like this ring of assholes. But what if they actually are the glue that's holding everything together? That would be fascinating. Like, because sometimes you have to be an asshole. Like, for instance, on an airplane, and I saw something about this recently. Somebody tried to open the door when they're 20,000 feet up in the air. Now, you can't do it. Like, it's physically impossible to do it, right? But they tried. Like, you have to be an asshole at that point. You've got 150 people on this plane. Somebody is like, they're taking a candlestick or something, trying to bash open the window in their seat, or they're trying to open the door, and they're trying to kill all 150 people on the plane. You have to be an asshole at that point. You may have to jack the jaw. And in this case, they tied her to a chair with duct tape. You can't have it. Like, is it nice to tie somebody to a chair with duct tape? No. That's basically kidnapping at this point, But you have to do it. Everybody understands the situation. There's context, right? Everybody understands. That's this. Maybe judicial has to really be assholes to everybody because otherwise we all die. So it's understandable. They're kinder, gentler fascists, like I was saying before, right? That's really, really interesting. It's a different take on all this. So I'm loving it. Now, I will say it's interesting to have a sheriff with deputies, but then also have judicial. Why do you have 2 sets? What is the purpose of that? And I'm not saying it's a writing flaw, because they're like I said at the beginning, an author wrote this. An author thought all this out, sat down for years writing the first novel, thought everything out. Now, authors make mistakes, obviously, but this person, somebody thought this out for a long time. So there's a reason, but right now the reason doesn't make any sense. Why would you have 2 sets of law enforcement? And so it reminds me of the Soviet Union in the military. They would have military officers, but then they would have political officers. So you'd be on a nuclear submarine, and the captain would be in charge of the nuclear submarine. But then there would be a political officer on the ship who could overrule the captain. You have 2 captains at that point. You can't have 2 captains. It doesn't work. This does not function in a military environment. It doesn't work. So that's one of the reasons why the military is incompetent in a lot of cases. You can't be making military decisions based on political reasons, and you can't have a political officer sitting there countermanding your orders if that doesn't fit the politics of the government. You can't do it. That's what this feels like. This doesn't function long term at a large scale. Now, this is a small scale city. And I've said this many times, like communism doesn't work on a large scale. A lot of systems of government do not work on a large scale, but they do work on a small scale. You know, the barter system, if you and me are the only people doing a barter system, that works great. You can't have 100 million people doing a barter system. It doesn't work. So some things can't scale up. So possibly this two systems of law enforcement in one place could work on a small enough scale. So it might work. But I think it's flawed. And it begs the question, why do you need this? So that's interesting. And then we've got this door that, and I can't remember the character's name, but Rebecca Ferguson is the actress, right? She's right now. It's at the end of the second episode. She's hovering, dangling over the water, trying to find this door that her boyfriend found. What the hell is that all about? Like, if we're right that the world is dead, then another door isn't going to help you, unless that door is to another city. Would there be another city within range of this city? I mean, that wouldn't make sense, because what if you have some kind of like cataclysmic event, a meteor or earthquake or something? You don't need both eggs in a very closed-in basket, right? So probably not. But it could be access to some kind of vehicle that could take you somewhere else. Like, I don't know. Like, you got a door. Doors are always fascinating. Another mystery, right? I think each episode is going to start create a mystery that they will answer, and then you get another mystery. Set up, payoff. Set up, payoff. Right. So yeah, I'm dying to see next episode. But the reason I did this video, and let me know if you want me to like do a recap or something, give my thoughts at the end of every episode as we move forward. I wanted to do this because I just find it very interesting that this is the first dystopian story I've seen where the butler didn't do it. And they're not even trying to make us think the butler did it. And also just the fact that you have empathetic people in positions of power. She doesn't want to kill anybody, the mayor. That's different. That's refreshing. Yeah, let me know your thoughts of the show. Like, so far, this is one of the best shows I've seen in quite a while.